You keep telling yourself it's strength, this silence, this patience, this ability to swallow what chokes you. You call it virtue, you call it growth. But there's a voice underneath, quieter than thought, whispering the truth you don't want to face. You're not healing, you're decaying. Because every time you tolerated what insulted your soul, you carved a piece out of yourself and handed it to someone who did not earn it. You made suffering look noble. You wore endurance like armor, thinking it made you untouchable. But it only made you a slow-moving target, predictable, passive, weak. You were trained to tolerate, by smiles, by systems, by people who needed your compliance dressed up as goodness. And so you learned to soften your glare, lower your voice, and nod when you wanted to leave. You told yourself you were being the bigger person, when in reality, you were disappearing. Not all prisons are built with bars. Some are built with expectations. And you've been serving a sentence for a crime you didn't commit. The crime of being awake in a world that demands your sleep. You thought that giving others the benefit of the doubt made you wise. But doubt, when weaponized, becomes a leash. One you tighten around your own throat every time you excuse the unacceptable. Every time you explain away disrespect, every time you flinch but stay silent. They told you it was mature to stay calm, that it was righteous to forgive, that it was enlightened to let it go. But they never told you that unchecked tolerance breeds contempt, not just in others, but in yourself. You start to hate the parts of you that let it slide. You start to resent the face in the mirror that keeps bowing to things that should have been burned. You suffer not because you're weak, but because you allowed slow poison to drip into your life under the label of peace. You let weakness wear a crown. You let lies pass as diplomacy. You let half-truths sit at your table and drink from your cup. All because you were taught that to confront is to escalate, that to say no is to be cruel, that to walk away is to be selfish. But here's the secret. Tolerance is not always strength. Sometimes it is fear in disguise, the fear of conflict, the fear of rejection, the fear of being seen as too much. So you shrink, you bite your tongue, you rationalize, and you die. Not all at once, but in fragments. Machiavelli knew this. He knew that power is not stolen in grand coup, it is surrendered in increments. One ignored offense at a time, one self-betrayal masked as maturity, one boundary eroded by guilt. You were not made to endure disrespect in exchange for peace. You were made to see through it and strike with silence. But you forgot. You were praised for being agreeable, not aware. Encouraged to understand, but never to question. You were made to believe that being likable was a strategy, that being forgiving made you higher, that being tolerant made you strong. But strength is not found in how much you can take. It's found in how quickly you stop taking it. There's a kind of rot that hides behind smiles, a kind of sickness that wraps itself in soft words and passive tones. It's not the loud that breaks you. It's the subtle, the drip, the whisper, the slow, invisible erosion of your sense of no. And when that erosion becomes familiar, it starts to feel like home. That's the final trick, the final betrayal. The prison becomes comfortable. You start to call it kindness. You start to call it love. You start to call it growth. But somewhere deep in the marrow of your being, the wolf stirs. It's quiet, still, but it's watching. It remembers, it knows, and it's waiting. For you to remember what happens when the prey stops pretending it's not dangerous. This is where the death of tolerance becomes the birth of clarity, because the moment you say, "This is not acceptable," something shifts. Not in them, but in you. You no longer beg for respect with your silence. You command it with your absence. You no longer water the weeds in the name of harmony. You set fire to what poisons you, and you do not flinch. You don't need to shout. You don't need to explain. You don't need to prove you've had enough. You just stop. And when they ask why, you don't answer. Because the most powerful no is the one spoken in action, in stillness, in the sovereign decision to no longer betray yourself to preserve the comfort of others. This is the awakening, the snapping of the final thread. Not with violence, but with vision. You see it now. Tolerance without discernment isn't grace. It's self-abandonment. And you are done abandoning yourself. They don't strike you. They don't scream. They don't break the glass. They fog it. They smile when they wound you. They laugh when they belittle you. And you tell yourself it's not worth reacting to. So you stay still and rot quietly. This is not kindness. This is not peace. This is betrayal in disguise. Because passive aggression isn't harmless. It's war disguised as wit. It's poison disguised as play. A slow, calculated campaign to test your boundaries, not by stepping over them, but by mocking their very existence, and you feel it. That flash of confusion, that flicker of rage, that voice inside you asking, "Did that just happen?" But you silence it, you swallow it, you nod, you smile back. And the crown slides just a little further off your head. Machiavelli would not call this humility. He would call it submission. The enemy that smiles is the most dangerous because they do not confront you with fists. They disarm you with ambiguity, with plausible deniability, with "I was just joking," with "You're too sensitive." They draw blood, then hand you the knife and ask why you're bleeding. And every time you let it slide, every time you laugh when it's not funny, every time you downplay what cut you, you are negotiating with a ghost, an invisible attacker who hides behind charm and soft tones. And you? You become complicit, a co-author of your own erosion. They punish you with silence. They offer compliments laced with venom. They make you feel guilty for asking for clarity. And you start adjusting, shrinking, second-guessing. Because the aggression is never enough to justify a war, but always enough to justify your self-doubt. That is the genius of their cruelty. It's soft. And soft power, when misused, becomes spiritual warfare. So what do? You stop playing diplomat with people who weaponize ambiguity. You stop interpreting shadows. You stop pretending it doesn't sting. You confront, not with rage, not with volume, but with precision, direct, icy, final. You do not explain. You do not ask if they meant it that way. You tell them what you saw. You mark the line, and then you vanish. Because if they can't stab you directly, they will erode you slowly. You must stop mistaking subtle for small. Passive aggression is not small. It's corrosive. It's an attempt to dominate you without accountability, to insult you without consequence, to claim superiority under the mask of humor. And when you allow it, when you rationalize it, you are teaching them how to treat you. You are saying, "Yes, you may harm me, as long as you do it quietly. But you were not built for quiet death. You were not made to be emotionally waterboarded under the name of grace. There is no grace in tolerating subtle disrespect. There is only the slow death of your own sovereignty. So you must make a decision. Will you keep enduring the fog, or will you burn the mask? You don't owe anyone your understanding when they're using it as a shield. You don't owe anyone your silence when it costs you your spine. You don't owe anyone your presence when their presence is a battlefield dressed as a dinner table. Passive aggression is manipulation. It is dominance wrapped in false innocence. And the moment you stop pretending otherwise, you reclaim the high ground. Not by shouting, but by withdrawing. Silence, when deliberate, is confrontation. Distance, when chosen, is punishment. And clarity, cold, direct, non-negotiable, is power. You do not match their tone. You do not stoop to sarcasm. You do not throw the same stones back. You cut through the game by refusing to play it. Let them twist. Let them scramble. Let them accuse you of being too serious. You are not here to decode their cruelty. You are here to guard your throne. So next time it happens, next time the joke isn't a joke, the smile isn't real, the silence feels like a weapon, you don't need to debate it. You only need to remember one thing. A threat that hides is still a threat. And a king who tolerates snakes at his feet will be bitten, not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. And when that day comes, it won't be because they were strong. It will be because you allowed their weakness to whisper for too long. Cut the whisper, kill the smile, dismantle the fog, and watch how fast the room shifts when you stop pretending you don't see it. They don't ask, they imply, they don't command, they suggest, not with volume, with tone, not with force, with guilt. They rewrite you, one edit at a time, and you call it compromise. You call it keeping the peace. But deep down, something inside you whispers, this is not me. That's how it begins, the slow abduction of self, not through violence, through mirrors. Mirrors they hold up to you, distorted, fogged, pre-written. And when you look, you don't see yourself. You see the version of you they prefer. The version that's easier to love, easier to manage, easier to control. And so you adjust. You tone it down, you become agreeable, predictable, palatable. You trade edges for acceptance, fire for familiarity, truth for peace. You call it growing up. You call it being reasonable. But tell me, since when did your soul need to apologize to be seen? Machiavelli warned. The greatest threat is not the enemy with a blade. It's the hand that touches your mind before it ever touches your body. The invader who doesn't steal your land. They steal your identity. And worse, they make you hand it over willingly. Every time you let them tell you who you are, you bury a part of yourself. Every time you laugh at the joke that belittles your ambition. Every time you let someone guilt you for wanting more. Every time you nod while your instincts scream, no, that's not harmony. That's quiet suicide. They don't take your power. You give it to them, piece by piece, wrapped in the language of politeness. You let them co-author your character. You let them narrate your life with their voice. And in return, you get to feel accepted. Accepted. By the very people who need you small to feel tall. But here's the truth. They don't love you. They love the version of you that doesn't threaten them. So what now? You redraw the lines. You stop handing out mirrors to people who distort your reflection. You stop answering to names that are not yours. You stop editing yourself for the approval of people who are terrified of your full intensity. Because every time you tolerate identity invasion, you become a ghost with a heartbeat. Present, but not alive. Seen, but not known. Loved, but only on the condition that you disappear. They will call you difficult when you return to yourself. They will call you arrogant when you stop shrinking. They will call you selfish when you finally say no. Let them. Your sovereignty is not a group decision. It is not a democracy. It is a silent empire. And the borders are drawn in how you respond. So you say less. You explain less. You detach faster. Not to be cruel, but to be clear. Because anyone who tries to rewrite you does not deserve access to the manuscript. You are not here to play a role in their story. You are not here to be the mirror they use to feel more secure. You are not here to be agreeable at the cost of your essence. You are here to become unshakable. And that begins with one act, refusing to let others name you, not with their expectations, not with their judgments, not with their limitations disguised as concern. You must reclaim your name from their mouths, reclaim your fire from their comfort, Reclaim your silence from their manipulations. There are people who will never know who you are, because they never bothered to ask. They only came to mold, but that's not your burden. Your burden is this: to stop tolerating it, to stop laughing when they make light of your seriousness, to stop smiling when they diminish your dreams, to stop explaining your boundaries like their requests. You do not negotiate with mirror thieves. You replace the mirror with a wall of mystery, of detachment, of sovereign clarity that says, "This is where I end, and you do not enter." If they love you less for that, good, let that love burn. Because anything that depends on your erasure was never love. It was control, and your silence, once a prison, becomes your weapon. Because now, when they look at you, they see nothing to mold. They see fire, stone, shadow. They see someone they cannot rename. They say you're kind. But what they really mean is you're convenient, accessible, predictable, someone who bleeds without asking why. And so they take. Not with violence, not with force, but with the silent entitlement of those who see your compassion as a utility, not a virtue. They come with smiles, with soft words, with wounded eyes, and leave with pieces of you you never agreed to give. And you think this is love. You think this is goodness. You think saying yes again and again makes you strong. But the truth is colder. Every time you give without boundary, without scrutiny, you devalue yourself. Your kindness becomes cheap. Your presence, a drug. And they become addicts, not to your soul, but to their own comfort around you. It doesn't start with theft. It starts with expectation. They stop thanking you. They stop asking. They assume, because you trained them to. You taught them that your time has no price, that your attention is theirs on demand, that your emotional labor is a faucet, always flowing, always warm, never empty. And now they resent you for even thinking of turning it off. You feel it, don't you? The subtle shift when you say no. The tension in the air when you take a step back. How quickly their gratitude turns sour. How fragile their affection becomes when it's no longer fed. That is not love. That is not loyalty. That is the shadow form of dependency, masked as connection. You were raised to believe that generosity is good. But they never taught you this. That unguarded generosity is a weakness predators worship. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't owe anyone your soft heart, on command. And if they only love you when you're giving, they never loved you. They loved the access. Let that sink in, because your kindness is not supposed to be a leash. It's supposed to be a blade, sheathed, selective, sacred, given only to those who can mirror it, match it, earn it. But when you give to takers, they do not evolve, they expand. Their demands grow, their gratitude shrinks, and your silence becomes consent. So you must become dangerous again. Not loud, not cruel, but unyielding. The next time someone acts entitled to you, don't explain, don't justify, just remove yourself. Let the void teach them what your presence was worth. Let the silence reintroduce your value. Let the absence echo louder than any apology. Because here's the Machiavellian truth you've buried. The moment your kindness is expected, it becomes worthless. A resource without rarity, a river they no longer fear drying up, and fear is essential, not terror, not threat, but the sacred fear of loss, the psychological understanding that you are not infinite, that you are not guaranteed, that your warmth is earned, not inherited. The moment they forget that, you must vanish, without warning, without closure, without a single drop of the empathy they drained. This is not cruelty, this is correction, because you are not a service. You are not a battery pack, you are not a refuge for the emotionally lazy. You are a sovereign mind with limited energy, sacred hours, and a currency no one has the right to print without cost. So reframe it. Your kindness is not weakness, but it is dangerous when misused. It creates imbalance. It creates parasites, and parasites never stop feeding unless you force them to starve. You must become the storm behind the calm, the edge behind the smile, the steel beneath the velvet. Because when you teach the world that kindness must be earned, only the worthy will reach for it. The rest will disappear. And good, let them. Because if they were only there for what you gave, they were never with you. So audit every connection, every name, every voice that speaks only when it needs. And then ask yourself the question you've been avoiding. Do they love you? Or do they love the feeling you give them? Detach, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Be compassionate, yes, but be selective. Be generous, but never unguarded. And above all, be dangerous in your silence, unreachable in your mystery, and surgical with your boundaries. Because the ones who truly value you will never feel entitled to you. There is a sound more corrosive than hatred, more suffocating than silence. It's the noise of the weak, disguised as truth. The endless gnawing hum of complaint. Not rage, not strategy, just noise. Aimless, helpless, circular noise. And you've tolerated it. Sat there pretending to listen, letting the infection seep in through your ears, into your bloodstream, nodding at powerlessness, agreeing with failure, feeding the very thing that drains you. You thought you were being compassionate. You thought holding space made you noble, but all it did was make you vulnerable to mental parasites, because chronic complainers don't want solutions. They want witnesses. They want someone to confirm the world is cruel. Not so they can fight, but so they can stay exactly where they are. Weakness loves company. It fears change, and it hides its cowardice behind the mask of venting. But what is venting if not rehearsed defeat? What is complaint without action if not spiritual decay? You've heard it all. The endless cycles, the same problems, recycled. Like rotting food, nothing changes, no insight, no evolution, just repetition. And every time you sit there absorbing it, you become part of the ritual. A silent priest at the altar of helplessness. But you were not built to be an echo chamber for victims. You were not born to host the noise of cowards. You were built for war, for clarity, for stillness so sharp it cuts through chaos like a blade. Complainers fear that silence, because in silence, the lies they tell themselves begin to scream. In silence, their excuses don't hold weight. In silence, their comfort dies. And so they fill the air with guilt, with noise, with reasons why nothing's their fault. But fault is power. Blame is the beginning of control. Without it, they rot in cycles they pretend to hate, but secretly feed from. You must starve them, not with cruelty, but with absence, with non-reaction, with the quiet detachment of someone who refuses to be pulled into another person's gravity. Because here is the truth you've been avoiding. Every complaint you entertain is a tax on your mind, a toll gate on your vision, a delay in your warpath, and you're paying it in focus, in energy, in the erosion of your inner discipline. Why? Because you fear being cold, because you fear being alone, because you don't want to be one of those people who walks away from someone in pain. But this isn't pain, it's performance, and performers crave audience more than resolution. So, walk away. Mid-sentence, mid-story, mid-excuse, walk. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Your time is a weapon, your presence is leverage, and when you offer it to those who squander it with endless noise, you dilute your power. You must protect your mental ecosystem like a fortress. No leaks, no static, no voices that speak of defeat as if it's sacred. Speak only with those who move, who fight, who reflect, who bleed, yes, but bleed forward. Let the complainers rot in their own storm. Let them drown in the echo chamber they built with their own breath. You are not their therapist. You are not their savior. You are a sovereign mind on a mission. So sterilize your environment. Audit every conversation. Cleanse your atmosphere of those who think stagnation is an identity. From this point forward, your silence is sacred. No more offerings to the gods of victimhood. No more nods to weakness disguised as conversation. No more shrinking yourself to make others feel less lost. Let them feel the cold of your absence. Let them feel the void where your validation used to be. And maybe, just maybe, they'll wake up, but that's not your concern. Your concern is clarity, focus, execution. Your concern is the war you're fighting inside your own mind. And every ounce of noise you tolerate is a step away from victory. You've heard enough. Now, speak only in results. Think only in solutions. And let the cowards scream into the void they created. Alone, you. You have no time left for noise. You hear it again. That familiar tone. That sigh wrapped in subtle guilt. That casual venom disguised as conversation. They start speaking, and your clarity begins to rot. It's never about solutions. It's never about action. Just noise, just weakness trying to survive through volume. And you listen, out of habit, out of guilt, out of a misguided sense of loyalty to suffering. But what does it cost? Every complaint they spill into your ears is a toxin you didn't consent to. Every grievance, every excuse, every "why me" is a thread unraveling your focus. It doesn't sharpen you, it softens your edge. And that's the point, because complainers are not seeking truth. They're seeking witnesses. Not to heal, but to perform, to manipulate, to weaponize attention as currency for their helplessness. They feed on being seen, but never changed. They want your energy, not your insight. They crave validation, not evolution. And they will disguise this parasitism as vulnerability, as just venting, as being real. But what they're really doing is infecting you with impotence. You were building, you were sharpening, you were silent, calculating, moving like a shadow toward what was yours. But then, their noise, their sob story, their chaos bleeding into your structure, and you paused, listened, held space for weakness you didn't cause and cannot cure. Why? Because somewhere inside you is the old programming, the false nobility that tells you to be available to all who suffer, to be a safe place for the broken, to be kind, even to the unworthy. But Machiavelli knew better. He knew the mind is a fortress, and not everyone should be allowed to speak through your walls. You think listening makes you noble, but often it just makes you available to the wrong frequency. You're not cruel for walking away. You're not heartless for valuing silence over sympathy. You are strategic because the truth is brutal. People who chronically complain are not lost. They're addicted to their own story, addicted to powerlessness. And you are their audience, their stage, their emotional trash can. Do you see the trap now? You try to help. They reject it. You try to redirect. They resent it. You try to disengage. They guilt you, because their survival depends on your attention, not your solutions, not your strength, just your ears. And when you finally pull back, they don't thank you. They label you cold, detached, selfish. If protecting your mental clarity is a betrayal, it's not. It's war, and your peace is the battlefield. So here's the shift. You stop being polite with your energy. You stop being a sponge. You stop offering oxygen to fires that have no intention of burning out, because every time you absorb a weak mind's narrative, you dilute your own, and you can't afford that. You are not here to be their emotional parent. You are not here to soothe the endless child within them. You are here to build, to master, To protect the architecture of your inner empire, that requires discipline. That requires silence. That requires filtering every voice that dares to enter your headspace. Ask yourself this: does this voice make me sharper? Does this conversation move me forward? Or am I just hosting weakness because I don't want to seem cruel? Let that question guide your filters. Let it burn through your guilt. Because here's the law. You either choose solitude or contamination. There is no neutral ground when it comes to energy. So you isolate, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. You surround yourself with builders, not bleeders, with minds that challenge, not drain, with voices that speak in strategy, not sorrow. And when the complainer returns, as they always do, with their latest tragedy, their latest injustice, their latest noise, you offer nothing, not comfort, not curiosity, not a single nod, just silence. Let it suffocate them. Because when attention dies, so does the parasite. And when the parasite dies, your clarity returns. You don't need more empathy. You need boundaries sharp enough to draw blood. You need inner walls that do not echo back weakness. You need the kind of self-respect that does not negotiate with emotional beggars, because the world is already full of noise. Your mind should not be. So clear it, sharpen it, filter it, like your life depends on it, because it does. You don't rise by healing the loud. You rise by silencing them. They smile, but behind it, static, tension in their tone, a tremor in their congratulations. You feel it, even if they won't say it. They resent your assent. They say you've changed. You're distant now, colder than you used to be, as if evolution is betrayal, as if sharpening yourself is an insult to their dullness. But deep down, you know what it is. They wanted your struggle, not your sovereignty. They were loyal only to your wounds. And now that you've healed, they don't recognize you. That's the curse of outgrowing people who secretly preferred you small. They don't envy your success. They envy your freedom. The moment you detach, they recoil. The moment you stop needing, they guilt you. The moment you become sovereign, they call you selfish. But selfish to who? To the ones who only loved you when you were easy to control. This is the unseen war, not between good and evil, but between your future and their comfort, between your rise and their relevance. They wear concern like silk, soft, refined, respectable, but it strangles. Because behind every "I'm just worried about you" is a blade dipped in honey. They want you confused. They want you doubting. They want you crawling back to who you were, so they don't have to face who they're not. This is not care. This is sabotage. And if you're not strategic, you'll mistake their guilt tripping for guidance. You'll slow down just to make them feel fast again. You'll dim your flame just to soothe their shadows. But what do you owe someone who resents your growth? Nothing. Not softness, not explanations, not access. Because envy rarely attacks with open hostility. It whispers, it gaslights, it masks itself as love, and poisons you with doubt. And the most dangerous saboteur is not the one who shouts against you. It's the one who claps while quietly wishing you'd fall. So ask yourself, who starts acting different when you stop struggling? Who stops supporting when your standards get higher? Who pulls away the moment you stop needing their validation? Those are your false allies. Those are the ones you must exile, not with hatred, but with silence, with indifference, with the kind of detachment that starves every manipulator of their power. Let them choke on your absence, because the moment you stop feeding their need to be needed, they'll reveal what they really are. And it will be ugly. They'll call you ungrateful. They'll play the victim. They'll twist your independence into cruelty. But that's not your burden to carry. Their envy is not your fault. Their insecurity is not your project. Their fragility is not your responsibility. You are not here to shrink for those who refuse to expand. So let them fall away. Not in drama, not in confrontation, just in silence. Your silence is power. It is the severing sword. Because nothing destabilizes a manipulator more than a target that no longer flinches. They expect emotion. They expect guilt. They expect the old version of you, soft, apologetic, uncertain. But you've changed, and that change is permanent. You are no longer accessible to people who only loved you when you were dependent. You are no longer persuadable by guilt wrapped in nostalgia. You are no longer entertaining weakness disguised as care. You see through it now. The praise that felt off. The support that came with strings. The passive judgment when you started. Moving different. It wasn't love. It was leverage. And now, they've lost it. So they weaponize your evolution. They call your growth arrogance, your distance, ego, your success, betrayal. But what they really mean is, how dare you stop needing me? How dare you build something without my permission? How dare you become something I can't control? Let them mean it. Let them hate it. Let them drown in it. Because your light is not theirs to dim, your mind is not theirs to manipulate, and your path is not theirs to sabotage. You owe loyalty only to what sharpens you, only to what honors your strength, only to those who evolve beside you, not beneath you. Clinging, anything less, is a trap. So walk on, colder, sharper, alone. If you must, but never compromised. Your peace is your shield. Your detachment is your weapon. Your evolution is non-negotiable. No more. Not in anger. Not in chaos. Not in a scream. Just no. The most powerful word you've never truly used. Because it was never about the sound of it. It was about the silence that follows. The silence where people realize they no longer have access to your energy, to your mind, to your loyalty, to your life. You walk away, not to make a statement, but to never explain again, to never negotiate again, to never prove your worth to the unworthy. That's the sacred no, the kind that doesn't come from bitterness, but from burial. You bury the part of you that once begged to be seen. You bury the mask that smiled through violations. You bury the open door that parasites mistook for home. And in that grave, you leave behind every excuse you made for people who poisoned you. You are not here to be understood. You are not here to be liked. You are here to move like a ghost, cloaked. In lightning, seen only in flashes, felt only through consequence. Because power does not plead. It withdraws. It vanishes. It removes oxygen from rooms built on entitlement. You've done your time, tolerating the takers, explaining yourself to people who never deserved a single sentence, waiting for a loyalty that was never coming, for an apology that was never real, for a shift that never belonged to you. And now, you stop. You stop romanticizing loyalty to the unworthy. You stop confusing endurance with virtue. You stop pretending that self-betrayal is some kind of sacrifice. They taught you that silence was weakness. But that was projection. Because the moment you turned quiet, they panicked, not because they missed you, but because they lost control. They don't mourn your absence. They mourn their power over you. And that is your revenge. Not fire, but ice. Not noise, but vanishing. Not proving your worth, but removing your presence. This is not rage. This is rebirth. You don't need closure when you realize the door was never real. You don't need forgiveness when you finally respect your own standards. You don't need to say a word when your silence already screams the truth. You tolerated poison. You wore the leash. You played the game. And now, you don't. You walk away. Without ceremony. Without theatrics. Without looking back to see if they noticed. Because looking back is a betrayal. of the version of you rising in silence, unchained, unapologetic, unreachable. You don't seek peace with others, you become it. You don't chase validation, you eclipse it. You don't ask for space, and you create a world so vast, they're no longer even visible. And the world feels it. The shift, the absence of noise, the arrival of precision. Because now, you don't speak to be heard. You speak to command. You don't show up to be liked. You show up to dominate. You don't stay to fix what's broken. You leave and become the thing that cannot be broken. This is not cruelty. This is calibration. Every yes you gave when you meant no was a crack in your armor, a leak in your power, a betrayal of the warrior you were always becoming. But now, there is no confusion, no softness where there should be edge, no open door where there should be steel. You are the wall they cannot climb, the silence they cannot decode, the presence that makes them rethink every boundary they once crossed. You are the storm that whispers instead of warns, and you owe nothing to the ones who fed off your light, to the ones who punished your strength, to the ones who mistook kindness for access. You owe only this, the final sacred vow, that from this moment forward, your no is sacred, final, untouchable, because true power is not shown in what you fight for, but in what you refuse to tolerate. You don't chase, you don't correct, you don't return, you walk away and stay unchained.